the school day ends, my father picks me up, we go home, and we go straight to the basement. And we play checkers. I was in second grade, and this is something that happened over and over and over again. As we played checkers, we would talk. We would exchange ideas, words, thoughts, man to boy. And I would talk to him about my day at school, my experiences. And he would tell me about what was going on in the world and what it was like for him to come to this country and what his experiences were before coming to the U.S. I heard stories about his antics. I heard stories about my grandparents and my great-grandparents. I learned about our connection to Trinidad. To this day, I've never beaten him in checkers. So that's something that I have to do before one of us goes. There was one story that came up more often than other stories, and I became obsessed with that story. It's the story that has fundamentally changed the course of my life. So my grandparents, I think many of my grandparents and great-grandparents had cancer. So my father was always going back and forth between Trinidad and the U.S. in order to take care of them. He wanted to make sure that their life was easy and that they had nothing to worry about, especially in light of their illness. And he said that on one such occasion, when he got on the plane, that he sat next to the most beautiful woman that he had ever seen in his life. Now, when I talk to the old folks in my family, I learned that my father was quite the flirt. It makes sense. He was a Trini man, but it confuses me because that's not at all who he is today. He's a very devout Christian man. But returning to this encounter with the woman on the plane, he couldn't talk to her, and she couldn't talk to him. They had a problem. There was a language barrier. She spoke nothing but Spanish, and he spoke English, but it was an English that Americans might consider broken English. So there was no hope for him. And my father always told me, or every time that he told this story to me, he said that if he were able to speak Spanish to that young lady, that I would not be the person that I was the day that he was telling me that story. Okay? So if my father were able to speak Spanish, I wouldn't exist. He would always try to end the story with a positive spin by saying that this is just one of the many reasons why it's important for you to learn a second language and be able to contact and be able to connect with other people. He would say, it doesn't have to be Spanish. It could be Japanese, Russian, Italian, whatever. But as soon as I got the opportunity, I started studying Spanish, and that led to to so many opportunities. It became like my motivation. It became like my motivation to be academically motivated and to have that drive to educate myself. I think because of that story, I got to go to college. Because of that story, I learned bachata and salsa and merengue. Because of that story, I got to visit Costa Rica. Because of that story, I got to have opportunities that people typically don't get where I come from. And I think the highlight of all the opportunities I've had so far was a midnight meetup with a German grad student on a beach in Martinique. There was a full moon. You had warm breezes, and you could hear the ocean crashing. And most importantly, there was an exchange of the French language.